Welcome back. Today we are going
Oh,
to
wow.
ancient China. We're going way, way back. And we're looking at Confucius.
Okay.
Some historians think that Confucius, the, huge philosopher,
Right.
might have had a secret half-brother.
Wow.
And not just any half-brother, but this guy Yanghu, who was, well, let's just say,
Okay.
a powerful and kind of controversial political figure.
Yeah, that does kind of change how you think about Confucius when you hear that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Like the champion of all this virtue and ethical leadership, and then connected to this
Yeah.
guy Yanghu,
Yeah.
who's all about ambition and force.
It's a big contrast, right?
Yeah, really interesting.
So I guess to even start to understand what this theory is all about,
Yeah.
we need to go back to basics.
Well-
Who is Confucius? And for that matter, who is Yanghu?
Okay, so Confucius, well, I think a lot of people probably already know this, but just in case he was a philosopher
Right.
and a teacher living in China during the Spring and Autumn period, which was a really crazy time.
Yeah, it sounds pretty intense.
Tons of political upheaval and social change.
Yeah.
And Confucius's teachings, they were all about morality and justice and social harmony.
Makes sense.
He believed in the power of, education and virtue
Okay.
to create a better society. And Yanghu, totally different guy. He was
Yeah.
a powerful military leader.
Oh, wow. So a man of action.
Exactly. And a politician, too. Same era as Confucius. But
Okay.
he was ambitious and he was cunning, and he was definitely not afraid to kind of play dirty to get what he wanted.
Oh, wow.
History remembers him as a pretty ruthless figure, actually.
Okay.
Like, he was willing to do whatever it took to get ahead.
So like the wise, peace-loving philosopher versus the ambitious, power-hungry politician. You wouldn't think they'd be, related at all, let alone half-brothers. But that's what this theory says.
I know. It's kind of wild.
What's the first clue that makes historians even think about
Right.
this connection?
Well, there's this book called The Records of the Grand Historian.
Okay.
And in the biographies of Confucius section,
Okay.
it describes what Confucius looked like.
Okay.
And he had a very distinctive appearance.
Oh, really?
Apparently not, like a classically attractive guy,
Okay.
and pretty tall for the time.
Huh, interesting.
And in the same book,
Yeah.
it describes Yanghu.
Uh-huh.
And guess what? He looks almost exactly like Confucius.
They looked alike.
Yeah.
Really alike.
Like really alike.
I mean, that seems like a huge coincidence,
Yeah.
especially, if Confucius had such unique features.
It does seem like more than a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And there's even this story about Confucius being mistaken for Yanghu,
Oh, no.
and they put him in prison because of it. Yeah, so that incident, on top of the descriptions of how similar they looked,
Yeah.
it's kind of what made people start to wonder if they were related, like maybe by blood.
I mean, yeah, that's crazy. It's not every day you hear about some famous philosopher being thrown in jail just because he looks like some
Right?
politician. But so how do we go from a case of mistaken identity
Yeah.
to saying, oh, they were half-brothers?
Right. Well, the next clue's in their family history.
Okay.
So both Confucius and Yanghu had ties to this powerful family, the Mengsun clan.
Okay.
They were super prominent back then.
Okay.
So Confucius's father, Kong, he was connected to them.
Gotcha.
And Yanghu's family was actually a branch of the Mengsun clan, too.
Wow. So they were moving in the same circles?
Exactly, like overlapping relationships and everything.
That does make it a lot more likely. I mean, they weren't just
Yeah.
two random guys who happened to share a few features.
Right.
They were part of the same, elite social network.
Exactly. And if we dig a little deeper into Confucius's dad's life,
Mm-hmm.
Kong, he was, well, let's just say a little bit of a rebel when he was younger.
Okay.
He didn't really care about following all the social norms, and he had a pretty unconventional lifestyle.
Interesting.
So this leads to a pretty interesting theory. What if Kong, he fathered Yanghu too?
Okay.
Maybe, outside of his marriage or something.
Oh, so we're talking like a secret love affair, a hidden scandal.
Could be.
Wow, that's pretty juicy stuff for ancient China.
Yeah.
But I mean, what evidence is there to really back up this whole
Right.
half-brother idea?
You can imagine finding hard evidence from way back then is pretty tough.
Yeah, I bet.
We're talking ancient texts and people's interpretations of things that happened centuries ago.
Right.
But there are some clues that are pretty convincing.
Okay, like what?
Okay, so Yanghu, he also went by the name Menghu.
Menghu?
Yeah, and that name, it connects him to this really interesting passage in the Book of Rites.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm not an ancient Chinese scholar.
Sure.
What's the Book of Rites?
Okay, so basically it's this ancient text that tells you all about
Okay,
social norms and rituals and proper behavior in ancient China.
gotcha.
So like a guidebook for how people were supposed to act in different situations.
Okay, interesting.
And in this book, there's this passage that mentions a Menghu.
Okay.
And it says he's an uncle to Confucius's half-brother, Meng Pi.
Hold on, so Yanghu, or Menghu, I guess,
Yeah.
and Confucius's acknowledged half-brother, they shared the same uncle.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a pretty big deal.
Right.
Could this be the missing link that proves they're half-brothers?
It could be. I mean, remember we already talked about the link between their families.
Right, the Mengsun clan.
Yeah, exactly. And now we've got this shared uncle, which is a much more direct
Yeah.
genealogical connection.
Yeah.
So it definitely adds more weight to the theory that Kong,
Right.
he might have fathered both of them.
This is getting good. We've got the resemblance of the shared social circle.
All right.
And now this potential family link through this uncle guy.
Uh-huh.
The pieces are starting to fit together, but let's say for a second,
Ah.
this theory is true.
Yeah.
What does it tell us about Confucius and Yanghu's relationship? I mean, they led such different lives.
They did.
How would this revelation have affected how they interacted?
Well, that's a great question. And honestly, it takes us into the realm of speculation.
Okay.
But, it's informed speculation based on what we know about them and their personalities.
Okay, I'm listening.
So imagine you're a young Yanghu.
Okay.
You hear all these rumors about who your father really is.
Right.
And you're maybe feeling some resentment towards Confucius, the son who everyone knows and accepts.
That makes sense.
Right? Like you're the outsider.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much tension and all those complex emotions would have, affected their interaction.
For sure. It definitely adds another layer to their story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really makes you think about them as people, not just these names in a history book.
Yeah.
But like real people with, family secrets and ambition and all that.
Exactly.
So with all this tension, bubbling under the surface, how did their relationship actually play out? As they got older, did they ever cross paths?
Oh, they definitely crossed paths.
Good.
And it wasn't exactly friendly, let's just say that.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there are stories about them disagreeing and power struggles. And even this one time at a banquet where Yanghu basically forced Confucius to leave.
What?
Yeah, really publicly humiliated him.
So this wasn't just normal sibling rivalry?
No, not at all.
Wow.
We're talking about two guys with a lot of influence, both trying to grab power in this super unstable political situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you think about it in the context of this possible, brotherly connection, it just adds this whole other level of intrigue, right?
For sure. You've got resentment and ambition, maybe even some weird sense of obligation all mixed up together.
Yeah, it's like a Shakespeare play set in ancient China. But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Later on, when Yanghu was, really powerful, he actually offered Confucius a job in his administration. Almost like an olive branch, like a chance to work together, maybe even fix their relationship.
Yeah, that's a fascinating twist.
It is Yanghu, despite everything that had happened between them and, his reputation for being ruthless.
Right.
He still reached out to Confucius maybe as a way to, acknowledge their connection.
Could be. But knowing Confucius, you can probably guess what happened.
He said no.
He did. Confucius turned him down flat. He wanted nothing to do with Yanghu's political machine.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, according to the book we're looking at, it was built on force and manipulation.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very Confucian.
No, not at all. It was everything Confucius stood against.
That's wild. I mean, to reject power, especially when it's offered by someone who could be your own brother.
Right.
It says a lot about Confucius.
It really does. I mean, what do you think scholars make of this refusal?
That's a good question. Why would he turn down such a powerful position?
Right.
Especially if it meant, maybe influencing Yanghu from the inside.
Well, to understand that, you have to really understand Confucius's philosophy.
Okay.
His whole system of thought was about ethical leadership, right? Achieving harmony through virtue.
Right.
Rejecting the use of force or coercion, any of that.
Makes sense.
So if he joined forces with Yanghu, whose methods were the complete opposite of his principles, it would have been like betraying everything he believed in.
So it wasn't just about disliking Yanghu personally or family drama?
No, it was about staying true to his core values, even if it meant giving up power and influence.
That's a powerful lesson in integrity.
It really is, especially when you think about the temptation and pressure he must have been facing.
Yeah. What do you think was going through Yanghu's mind when Confucius rejected him?
Right. Was he mad? Did he feel betrayed?
Yeah.
Or maybe was there a part of him that understood or even respected Confucius's decision?
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, historians have debated that for centuries.
Really?
Yeah, some people think Yanghu felt insulted, like Confucius was challenging his authority.
Okay.
But others think that even though Yanghu was ruthless on the surface, he might have actually admired Confucius's principles.
That's a cool idea. Adds another layer to their relationship.
Right, like maybe underneath all the rivalry and politics, there was also some understanding or even admiration.
Yeah, but what happened next? I mean, did Yanghu retaliate? Did he try to make life hard for Confucius?
Well, that's the crazy part. Confucius actually lived a pretty peaceful life after this, even after rejecting Yanghu publicly.
Really?
Yeah, and that's where the author of our book proposes something really interesting.
Okay, what's that?
They think that maybe Yanghu, even though they were so different, might have secretly used his power to protect Confucius.
What?
Yeah, like he made sure Confucius was safe and that none of his political enemies could mess with him.
Wait, are you saying that Yanghu, the ruthless, power-hungry guy, was secretly looking out for Confucius, the brother who had just, rejected him?
Yeah, it does seem kind of contradictory.
Yeah, it does.
But that's what's so cool about history. It's full of these unexpected twists and turns.
For sure.
So this theory basically says that even though their relationship was complicated and full of conflict, maybe there was also this weird sense of family duty on Yanghu's part.
It really makes you rethink everything we thought we knew about these guys.
I know, right?
Right.
We tend to think of historical figures as being one-dimensional, like either good or bad.
Yeah.
But this story shows us that they were real people with messy relationships and motivations that aren't so easy to categorize.
It's like peeling back the layers of time and seeing them not as like these statues on a pedestal,
Right.
but as real people struggling with their own flaws and ambitions and maybe even a sense of responsibility towards someone they secretly considered family.
Exactly. And it's in those gray areas,
Yeah.
where things aren't so clear-cut that we often find the most interesting historical insights.
So we've talked about how this potential, brotherly connection might have influenced Confucius's choices.
Yeah.
But now let's flip the script.
Okay.
How might this revelation have affected Yanghu's own path and how history remembers him?
That is the million-dollar question, and it leads us to a really important turning point in our deep dive.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really makes you think differently about these guys. They're not just, the hero or the villain like in a movie.
Right, exactly.
They're more complicated than that.
Yeah, way more. And what's especially interesting is that this connection might help explain some things about Confucius's later life.
Oh, okay, how so?
Well, remember, Confucius was a scholar and teacher, right? Not like a typical politician.
Yeah.
But he traveled all over China, visiting different states, talking to rulers and officials.
That's right. He wasn't just, sitting in some library.
No, he was out there in the world trying to spread his ideas about, a better society.
Okay, but what does Yanghu have to do with all that traveling?
Well, some scholars think that those travels, especially which states he decided to visit and which ones he avoided, might have been because of Yanghu and his political moves.
Oh, interesting, because Yanghu was super powerful, right?
Exactly. He had influence all over the place in all his actions, his alliances, his enemies.
Right.
It created this whole complicated political landscape that Confucius couldn't just ignore.
So you're saying Confucius's travels weren't just random. He was strategically navigating a political minefield.
Exactly. Maybe trying to stay out of Yanghu's way.
It makes you look at his journeys in a whole new light.
It does. For example, some historians think Confucius might have avoided certain states on purpose. The ones where Yanghu was really strong.
Makes sense. Like he was saying, hey, I'm over here trying to promote virtue and good governance.
Right.
I don't want to get mixed up in your political drama.
Yeah, and remember, this was a time when different states were always fighting for power.
Right.
So if Confucius got too close to any one faction, even through family, it could have hurt his message and his ability to teach.
It's a tough position to be in, for sure.
Yeah, he had to be really careful.
It's crazy to think about all the strategy and personal stuff that might have gone into, Confucius's travels.
I know.
It also shows you the limitations he faced, even though he was becoming more and more famous.
Yeah.
Even as his teachings were spreading, he was still stuck in this system that was all about power and ambition and sometimes, just brute force.
Yeah, that's true. And it leads to another really interesting point.
Okay, what's that?
Even though he traveled and tried to stay neutral, Confucius couldn't completely escape Yanghu.
Right.
I mean, there were stories about Confucius talking to rulers and officials who were like Yanghu's allies or even his enemies.
Oh, wow. So even when he tried to distance himself, they kept crossing paths.
They did, either directly or indirectly.
I bet that made for some awkward conversations.
Probably. I can just imagine Confucius trying to have a calm philosophical discussion about good governance,
right,
with Yanghu's influence hanging over everything.
It just shows how intertwined their lives were, even though they had such different ideas about leadership.
Exactly. And it makes you rethink how we interpret certain events in Confucius's life.
Okay, how so?
Were some of his conversations with rulers influenced by Yanghu behind the scenes?
Interesting.
Were some of his teachings actually aimed at Yanghu's methods, even if he couldn't say it directly?
It's like we're trying to solve a historical puzzle, but we only have a few pieces.
I know. It's so fascinating to imagine all that going on behind the scenes.
It really is.
And it's this mix of historical facts and educated guesses and all those unanswered questions that make this whole theory so interesting.
Yeah, it reminds us that history isn't just about dates and names.
Right.
It's about relationships and ambition and all these mysteries that still capture our imagination today.
Exactly. So we've explored this theory about Confucius and Yanghu. We've looked at the evidence.
We sure have.
And we've talked about how it might change how we see them both.
Yeah, but let's take a step back for a second. Why does this even matter? Why should we, in the 21st century, care about some family secret from ancient China?
That's a great question. And it's not just about historical gossip.
Okay.
This deep dive makes us really think about how we understand history.
Okay, I see that.
It reminds us that the past isn't black and white.
Right.
And the people we study were real people with complex relationships and hidden motives.
Yeah, they had their own struggles that shaped their actions.
Exactly. And by understanding that, the human side of things,
right,
we get a much better appreciation for the challenges they faced, the choices they made, and the impact they had.
I have to say, this has really changed how I think about Confucius.
Yeah.
He's not just some wise guy from the past. He was a real person dealing with complicated stuff.
Yeah, and maybe even this powerful, manipulative half-brother.
Right, and it's that realization that even the most famous people had their own issues.
For sure.
It's what makes history relevant to us today.
Totally, and it reminds us that history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding the present and shaping the future.
That's a good point.
By looking at these hidden connections and questioning our assumptions about historical figures, we learn a lot about human nature and leadership and how strong family ties can be, even in the middle of political chaos.
Well said. And maybe most importantly, it reminds us to keep asking questions and keep exploring.
Right. Never stop being curious.
Exactly. Well, this has been a fascinating trip back in time.
It has.
Full of intrigue and mystery and those aha moments that make exploring history so much fun.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if this deep dive has piqued your interest,
oh yeah,
we encourage you to check out the book we've been talking about, Muse.
It's a great read.
Yeah. And, look into other historical mysteries about famous people.
Right.
And never stop questioning the stories we're told, because the best part of history isn't memorizing facts.
Right.
It's about uncovering those hidden connections and exploring how complicated human experiences shape the world we live in.
That's a great way to put it. Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.